The most dangerous people in the world never carry weapons. They carry secrets. The crystal chandeliers of the Montevideo Grand Hotel scattered gold across the marble ballroom, while the richest people in Europe smiled like nothing bad had ever touched their lives. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Diamonds flashed beneath the warm Monaco lights. A violin quartet played near the fountain imported from Florence, and somewhere beyond the ocean-facing windows, million-dollar yachts drifted quietly against the midnight water. Elena Brooks adjusted the silver badge hanging from her black satin dress and forced herself to breathe normally. She hated events like this. Too much perfume. Too many fake smiles. Too many billionaires pretending the world was clean because they could afford white tablecloths and expensive charity speeches. Relax, her supervisor whispered beside her. You're just here to review the acquisition documents. Elena nodded once, though the strange feeling in her stomach refused to disappear. Across the ballroom stood Adrian Cole, 6'3", dark tailored tuxedo, cold blue eyes that made investors nervous with a single glance. The billionaire owner of Cole Energy rarely smiled in public, but tonight his hand rested possessively against the waist of the woman beside him. Celeste Laurent. The entire room watched her without meaning to. Her red silk gown flowed behind her like liquid fire as cameras flashed from every direction. Beautiful people always looked untouchable under soft lighting. Elena studied her quietly while pretending to check merger reports on her tablet. Something about Celeste never matched the image the media sold. She smiled too carefully, watched exits too often, touched Adrian like she already owned him. Then Elena noticed it. Celeste slipping away from the ballroom alone. Fast, calm, intentional. Elena frowned. The restricted glass conference lounge upstairs was supposed to be empty until tomorrow morning's energy summit. Yet 30 seconds later, she saw the private elevator doors close behind Celeste. Instinct pulled Elena forward before logic could stop her. The upstairs hallway was silent except for the distant hum of ocean waves below the cliffs. Through the frosted glass walls of the conference room, Elena saw Celeste standing beside the illuminated merger files spread across the table. Her phone camera moved quickly over page after page. Elena's pulse stopped. After tomorrow, Celeste said softly into an earpiece, Adrian loses everything. Elena froze behind the glass door. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Celeste turned slightly, revealing a small gold lighter resting beside the documents. A black falcon engraved into the metal glimmered beneath the white conference lights. Then Celeste smiled. Not the elegant smile from downstairs. This one was different. Sharp, empty, dangerous. And for the first time that night, Elena realized the woman sleeping beside one of the most powerful billionaires in America might be preparing to destroy him. Elena did not sleep that night. The image of Celeste standing beside the glowing merger files replayed in her mind over and over, while Monaco slowly disappeared behind the tinted windows of the company jet. Around her, executives laughed softly over bourbon and stock projections, pretending tomorrow would simply be another victory for Adrian Cole. But Elena could not stop hearing those words. Adrian loses everything. Across the cabin, Adrian sat alone near the window, one hand resting against his jaw while city lights passed beneath the aircraft like scattered gold dust. Even exhausted, he carried the kind of presence that made people lower their voices around him. Powerful men usually demanded attention. Adrian never needed to. He barely looked up as another executive congratulated him on the pending energy merger that would reportedly make Cole Energy the largest independent power supplier on the East Coast. You built an empire, the man said proudly. Adrian answered with a small nod. Empires fall faster than people think. Elena looked away before he noticed her staring. That sentence stayed with her longer than it should have. For hours later, Manhattan rose from the morning fog like steel and glass carved into the sky. By 8:30, Elena was already inside Cole Tower reviewing financial risk reports while rain streaked against the 62nd floor windows. Everything inside the building moved with terrifying precision. Assistants in tailored suits, quiet elevators, security doors that opened with silent scans. The entire company felt less like an office and more like a controlled machine built around one man. Adrian Cole. Miss Brooks. Elena looked up sharply. Adrian stood outside her office holding a black coffee. Up close, he looked even more exhausted than he had on the jet. His tie was gone. The top button of his white shirt remained undone, though somehow he still looked intimidating. I reviewed your analysis from Singapore, he said calmly. You caught errors my senior advisors missed. Elena blinked. Compliments rarely existed inside this company. Thank you. Adrian studied her another second. You were upstairs at the gala last night. Her stomach tightened instantly. Excuse me. The conference level. His voice remained quiet. Security logs showed your badge access. Elena forced herself not to panic. This was the moment. She could tell him everything. About Celeste. About the photographs. About the threat hiding beside him in plain sight. But then she remembered the way Adrian touched Celeste at the gala. The trust in his eyes whenever she entered a room. Men like Adrian Cole did not believe accusations without proof, especially against women they loved. I was reviewing merger schedules, Elena answered carefully. Adrian watched her in silence. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind him. Somewhere below, New York traffic screamed through wet streets. Finally, he nodded once. Good. Because starting today, you are joining my internal strategy team. Elena stared at him. Sir, the merger closes in 72 hours, Adrian said. And I only trust people who notice details. Then his phone vibrated. A message appeared across the screen. Celeste Laurent. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly as he read it. That tiny change in his face told Elena something terrifying. He was completely in love with her. By midnight, most of Cole Tower had gone dark except for the executive floor, where billion-dollar decisions still moved beneath cold white lights and silent glass walls. Elena sat alone inside the strategy room, scrolling through merger projections while thunder rolled somewhere above Manhattan. The storm outside painted silver reflections across the polished conference table. 3 empty coffee cups sat beside her laptop. She barely noticed them anymore. The deeper she looked into the acquisition files, the stranger everything became. Numbers had been moved too perfectly. Offshore transactions appeared and disappeared within hours. Entire shell corporations existed without employee records or physical addresses. Someone inside the merger was hiding money with surgical precision. Elena leaned back slowly, exhaustion pressing behind her eyes. Then she saw it. Laurent Holdings, a consulting company connected to one of the offshore transfers. Her pulse quickened instantly. She opened another document. Then another. Every trail somehow circled back to the same hidden network of accounts buried beneath layers of legal structures. And at the center of it all was a name that technically did not exist before 5 years ago. Celeste Laurent. Elena stared at the screen in disbelief. No birth records before Paris. No university history. No tax filings. No verified modeling contracts despite thousands of magazine photographs online. It was as if someone had manufactured a perfect woman from thin air. The soft sound of heels crossing marble made Elena close the files immediately. She looked up. Celeste stood in the doorway wearing an ivory cashmere coat draped loosely over her shoulders. Even at nearly 1 in the morning, she looked impossibly polished. Still working? Celeste asked with a warm smile. Elena forced herself to remain calm. The merger deadline is close. Celeste stepped slowly into the room, her perfume subtle and expensive. Adrian likes hardworking women. Her eyes drifted briefly toward Elena's laptop, especially loyal ones. Elena said nothing. The silence between them tightened like invisible wire. Celeste walked toward the rain-covered windows overlooking Manhattan. Do you know what I learned about powerful men? She asked softly. They never fear losing money. Lightning flashed beyond the glass, illuminating her reflection. They fear humiliation. Elena studied her carefully. Why are you telling me this? Celeste smiled faintly without turning around. Because smart women recognize each other. Then Elena noticed it again. The gold lighter resting inside Celeste's hand. Black Falcon engraved across the metal surface. Celeste clicked it open once before slipping it back into her coat pocket. A signal. A warning. Or maybe both. Suddenly the conference room door opened behind them. Adrian entered, loosening his tie as exhaustion settled across his face. His eyes moved immediately to Celeste. The tension in his shoulders disappeared almost instantly. I thought you went home, he said quietly. Celeste crossed the room toward him with effortless elegance. I wanted to see you. Adrian kissed her forehead gently, the kind of small, intimate gesture people only showed when trust already lived deep inside them. Elena looked away before the ache in her chest became obvious. Miss Brooks, Adrian said suddenly, turning back toward her. You are coming with us to Zurich tomorrow morning. Elena blinked. Zurich? Final negotiations, Adrian answered. I need someone I can rely on. Celeste's smile never changed, but for half a second, her eyes hardened when they landed on Elena. And in that moment, Elena realized something even more dangerous than corporate espionage was beginning to happen. Adrian Cole was starting to trust her. The private jet to Zurich felt less like transportation and more like a floating boardroom suspended above the Atlantic. Soft jazz drifted quietly through hidden speakers while rain streaked across the oval windows. Elena sat near the back of the cabin surrounded by confidential files, trying to ignore the fact that Adrian Cole was only a few feet away. Since dawn, he had barely stopped working. Conference calls, investor negotiations, European market updates flashing nonstop across his tablet. Billionaires never truly rested. They simply learned how to function while exhausted. You have not eaten in 6 hours. Elena looked up in surprise. Adrian stood beside her seat, holding a small white plate from the kitchen. Fresh fruit, almonds, a turkey sandwich untouched by anyone else. I am fine, she answered automatically. Adrian set the plate down anyway. That was not a suggestion. Elena almost smiled despite herself. Outside the windows, storm clouds swallowed the sunrise in shades of silver and charcoal. Do you always control everyone around you? She asked quietly. Adrian leaned one hand against the seat across from her. Only when mistakes cost billions of dollars. And what happens when people disappoint you? For the first time all morning, his expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Something heavier. I stopped trusting them. The answer landed harder than Elena expected. Before she could respond, movement at the front of the cabin caught her attention. Celeste emerged from the private suite wearing a cream-colored sweater and dark sunglasses despite the dim lighting. Elegant. Untouchable. Her eyes settled instantly on Elena beside Adrian. Am I interrupting something? She asked smoothly. Adrian stepped back without hesitation. We are reviewing Zurich projections. Celeste smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Of course you are. She slipped into the seat beside Adrian naturally, her fingers brushing his wrist like it belonged there. Elena lowered her gaze back to the documents, pretending not to notice the sudden tension wrapping itself around the cabin. 2 hours later, Zurich appeared below them beneath fresh snow and pale winter light. The city looked almost unreal from above. Clean rooftops, frozen riverbanks, church towers rising through fog. By evening, Elena stood inside the Kronenberg International Hotel while executives filled the grand ballroom downstairs for pre-merger negotiations. Crystal lights reflected against polished black floors. Waiters moved silently through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne. Everything felt expensive enough to hide corruption beautifully. Elena stepped into a quiet hallway to clear her head when she heard voices beyond a partially opened door. She stopped instantly. Celeste stood inside the adjoining lounge, speaking softly in French into her phone. Elena could not understand every word, but one phrase cut through. Clearly, tomorrow night. The server access will be open. Elena's blood ran cold. Then another voice interrupted behind her. You are terrible at pretending not to investigate people. Elena turned sharply. Adrian stood at the end of the hallway, jacket unbuttoned, hands resting loosely in his pockets. The soft hotel lighting caught the exhaustion beneath his eyes. I do not know what you mean, Elena said carefully. Adrian walked closer, lowering his voice. You look at Celeste like you were trying to solve a puzzle. Elena's pulse hammered against her ribs. Maybe I just do not trust people easily. Adrian studied her for a long moment before giving a faint, tired smile. Then we have something in common. Snow drifted slowly beyond the towering windows of the Kronenberg Hotel, while the negotiation dinner downstairs unfolded beneath crystal chandeliers and forced billionaire smiles. Elena should have been reviewing acquisition reports with the legal team, but instead she sat alone inside the executive lounge replaying every strange detail connected to Celeste Laurent. The missing records, the offshore accounts, the hidden phone calls, and now server access scheduled for tomorrow night. None of it felt accidental anymore. Her laptop screen reflected softly against the dark glass as she searched through archived European business registries. Then suddenly, a photograph appeared. Elena froze. 5 years earlier. Geneva. A luxury energy conference. Standing beside a Russian trade consultant was a woman with shorter blonde hair and darker makeup, but the face was unmistakable. Celeste. Only the name beneath the photograph was not Laurent. It was Camille Verneau. Elena's heartbeat quickened. She clicked deeper into the archive. Every document connected to Camille Verneau had been erased less than 18 months later. Identity wiped clean. Digital footprint destroyed. Someone powerful had rebuilt this woman from the ground up. You really should stop digging. Elena slammed the laptop shut instinctively. Celeste stood near the doorway holding a glass of champagne, her red lipstick almost startling against the pale winter light. You frightened me, Elena said. Quietly. No, Celeste replied with a calm smile. You frightened yourself. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. Celeste walked slowly around the lounge, fingertips brushing the leather chairs like she owned the building itself. Do you know the difference between ambitious women and dangerous women? She asked softly. Elena remained silent. Celeste stopped directly across from her. Ambitious women want a seat at the table. Dangerous women realize the table itself can be burned down. Her words settled heavily between them. Elena forced herself to hold eye contact. Who are you really? For the first time, Celeste laughed quietly. Not warmly. Not kindly. That is the wrong question. She lifted her champagne glass slightly. The right question is whether Adrien survives what comes next. Elena stood immediately. If you are threatening him, careful, Celeste interrupted gently. Men like Adrien Cole always protect the women they love. Her eyes lowered briefly toward Elena's closed laptop. Unfortunately for you, he loves me. Then she walked past Elena toward the door before pausing one final time. One more thing, she added softly without turning around. Women like you usually disappear inside worlds like this. Quiet analysts. Invisible employees. You mistake intelligence for power. The door closed behind her. Elena remained frozen for several seconds before finally exhaling. Her hands trembled slightly now. Not from fear. From realization. Celeste already knew she was investigating. Somewhere below the hotel, music drifted upward from the ballroom, while billionaires toasted partnerships worth billions of dollars. But Elena suddenly understood none of this was only about money anymore. This was war hidden beneath luxury, and she was standing directly in the middle of it. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts moments later. Miss Brooks. Elena opened the door carefully. Adrien stood outside holding 2 cups of coffee, snow melting lightly against the shoulders of his dark overcoat. You disappeared from dinner, he said quietly. Elena looked at him differently now. Not just as a billionaire. Not just as her boss. But as a man walking blindly beside. Someone capable of destroying his entire life while he trusted her completely. Adrien held out one of the coffees toward Elena. You look like you have not slept in days. Their fingers brushed briefly as she accepted the cup. Warmth spread unexpectedly through her chest. And for the first time since Monaco, Elena realized the real danger was no longer simply exposing Celeste Laurent. The real danger was how much she was beginning to care about Adrien Cole. The next evening, Zurich disappeared beneath freezing rain while the final merger summit unfolded inside one of the most secure financial buildings in Europe. Entire city blocks around the conference center were lined with black security vehicles and flashing cameras. Reporters crowded behind barricades shouting questions about Cole Energy's historic expansion into European infrastructure. Inside the 73rd floor executive suite, tension moved silently beneath polished luxury. Advisors whispered over tablets. Lawyers reviewed contracts for the 100th time. Stock projections glowed across enormous digital screens overlooking the city skyline. Everything had been calculated down to the second. Everything except betrayal. Elena stood near the back of the operations room, watching encrypted server activity scroll rapidly across her monitor. Since morning, something had felt wrong. Small system delays. Strange login attempts routed through offshore locations. Tiny anomalies most people would ignore. But Elena noticed details for a living. And details were beginning to scream. Adrien, she said quietly, walking toward him. He stood beside the main conference table reviewing final signatures with senior investors. I think someone is inside the system already. Adrien looked up immediately. How certain are you? Very. Before he could answer, every screen inside the room suddenly flickered black. The lights dimmed once. Twice. Then alarms exploded through the building. Red warning notifications flooded every monitor at once. Unauthorized access detected. Internal server breach in progress. European energy contracts leaked online. Confidential merger documents compromised. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Phones rang nonstop. Executives shouted over each other. Security teams rushed through the hallways while financial news alerts exploded across television screens mounted above the room. Coal energy stock dropping 18% in under 4 minutes. International investigation expected. Potential fraud inquiry pending. Elena's stomach dropped. This was not random. This had been planned perfectly. Adrian grabbed a tablet from the nearest analyst, scanning the damage with terrifying calm while the world around him collapsed. But Elena noticed the muscle tightening sharply along his jaw. Contain the servers, he ordered coldly. Lock every external connection now. Sir, another executive stammered, pale with panic. The breach came from inside our access network. Silence crashed through the room. Then one of the cybersecurity directors spoke carefully. The login credentials trace back to executive clearance level. Elena felt her pulse stop. Another screen flashed open. Employee identification records appeared one by one until a single name filled the center monitor. Elena Brooks. The room turned toward her instantly. Shock, suspicion, fear. Adrian stared at the screen without speaking. Elena shook her head immediately. No, someone planted this. Those are your credentials, the director replied. I did not do this. But even to her own ears, the words sounded thin against the avalanche happening around them. Then Elena saw her. Celeste standing quietly near the far end of the room beside the windows overlooking Zurich. Calm, untouched. Her expression almost sympathetic as the empire around Adrian burned in real time. Their eyes locked for half a second, and Celeste smiled. Tiny, almost invisible, but enough. Elena finally understood. This was the setup. The fake records. The delayed system warnings. The psychological games. Celeste had prepared an exit strategy weeks before anyone noticed. Security is requesting authorization to isolate Miss Brooks immediately, someone said carefully. Adrian remained completely still. Elena looked at him desperately, waiting for him to say something. To trust her. To remember every late night, every warning, every moment she tried to protect him. Instead, Adrian slowly lifted his eyes toward her. The disappointment there hurt more than anger ever could. Escort Miss Brooks to a private holding room, he said quietly. And just like that, the only person Elena had started to trust chose the wrong woman. The holding room overlooked the frozen Zurich skyline through thick reinforced glass, but Elena barely noticed the city anymore. Hours had passed since the breach, yet the chaos outside only seemed to grow louder. Financial channels replayed the collapse nonstop across muted televisions mounted in the hallway. Analysts called it the biggest corporate security disaster in years. Coal energy stock had fallen almost 30% before markets finally suspended trading. Reporters were already calling Adrian Cole reckless. Some were calling him finished. Elena sat motionless at the steel conference table while federal investigators moved in and out of the room, asking the same questions repeatedly. Did she leak the files? Did she work with foreign investors? Did she have outside financial connections? Every answer sounded useless against the mountain of fabricated evidence now attached to her name. Her access codes, her workstation, her credentials. Someone had built the perfect trap. The door opened again just after midnight. Elena expected another investigator. Instead, Adrian walked inside alone. The room immediately felt smaller. He looked nothing like the untouchable billionaire from Monaco anymore. His tie was gone completely now. Exhaustion darkened beneath his eyes. The pressure of losing billions of dollars in a single night sat visibly across his shoulders. Yet somehow the hardest thing to look at was not his anger. It was the disappointment. Adrian closed the door behind him quietly. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Snow drifted beyond the windows while the city lights blurred beneath the storm. Tell me the truth, he finally said. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You still think I did this? Adrian's jaw tightened. Your credentials opened the servers. Because someone planted them there. You were investigating my company. Without authorization. Elena stood immediately. I was trying to protect you. Adrian laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. Protect me. His voice dropped lower. Do you have any idea what happened tonight? Yes, Elena answered sharply. Because I warned you something was wrong. Without evidence. Because the evidence was hidden by the woman sleeping beside you. Silence crashed between them. Adrian's eyes hardened instantly at the mention of Celeste. Enough. Elena felt something inside her break. You looked at me like I was someone you could trust, she whispered. And you still chose her. Adrian looked away first. That hurt more than if he had shouted. Elena swallowed hard, fighting the pressure building in her chest. Celeste Laurent is not who you think she is. And who exactly is she? Adrian asked coldly. Elena stepped closer slowly. 5 years ago she had another identity. Camille Verneau. Every record disappeared after she entered your world. Adrian's expression barely changed, but Elena noticed it. The smallest flicker of uncertainty. She continued carefully. She knew about the server breach before it happened. She has offshore connections tied to the merger accounts. Adrian, she is using you. For one suspended moment, Elena thought he might finally listen. Then his phone vibrated. Celeste's name appeared across the screen again. Adrian stared at it silently before answering. I will be there soon, he said softly. Elena closed her eyes briefly. That softness in his voice told her everything. Even now, after disaster, after betrayal, after warnings, he still trusted Celeste more than her. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket and moved toward the door. Federal investigators are flying you back to New York in the morning, he said quietly. Elena's voice stopped him before he could leave. When this is over, she whispered, you are going to realize the most dangerous person in your life was never me. Adrian paused for half a second without turning around. Then he walked out of the room, leaving Elena completely alone with the sound of the storm outside and the crushing realization that the man she was falling in love with no longer believed her. 3 days later, New York was drowning in headlines. Every financial network in America replayed the collapse of coal energy like public execution footage. Analysts predicted bankruptcy. Investors demanded resignations. Politicians called for federal oversight. And at the center of it all stood Adrian Cole, suddenly transformed from visionary billionaire into the face of catastrophic failure. Elena watched the coverage silently from a small apartment in Brooklyn borrowed from an old college friend. Federal investigators had released her temporarily while continuing the inquiry, but her reputation was already destroyed online. Social media called her a traitor, a corporate spy, a woman who nearly crippled the American energy market. None of them knew the truth. But Elena finally had something more valuable than public opinion. She had proof. The breakthrough came at 2:17 in the morning while rain hammered against the apartment windows. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by printed transaction reports, archived photographs, and security logs copied secretly before Zurich collapsed. Her exhausted eyes drifted again toward the image burned into her memory. The gold lighter with the black falcon engraved into the metal. Suddenly her breath caught. Elena grabbed her laptop instantly and reopened the Geneva conference photographs from 5 years earlier. There it was. Camille Verneau standing beside the same Russian consultant. And in his hand was the identical black falcon lighter. Not jewelry. Not decoration. A symbol. Elena searched deeper into encrypted trade records connected to the falcon insignia until a hidden intelligence report surfaced beneath restricted European security archives. Black Falcon Consortium. Economic espionage network specializing in corporate infiltration through fabricated identities and romantic targeting operations. Elena stared at the screen in disbelief. Celeste had never been working alone. Adrian was not simply a victim. He was the final target in a coordinated international operation worth billions. Her phone vibrated suddenly. Unknown number. Elena hesitated before answering. You should have stopped investigating, Celeste's calm voice said softly through the line. Elena's pulse spiked instantly. You framed me. No, Celeste replied almost gently. I simply understood human weakness better than you did. Elena forced herself to remain steady. Adrian trusted you. Exactly. Silence tightened between them. Then Celeste added quietly. Tonight ends everything. The call disconnected. Elena moved instantly. 2 hours later, black cars lined the entrance of the Global Energy Summit in Manhattan, while cameras flashed nonstop beneath cold evening rain. Inside the grand ballroom, politicians, executives, and international investors gathered for Adrian Cole's emergency public statement. The atmosphere felt tense enough to crack. Adrian stood alone near the stage wearing a dark navy suit. his expression colder than Elena had ever seen it. The past week had aged him visibly. She almost did not recognize him anymore. Then movement near the ballroom entrance caught her eye. Celeste entered wearing a silver gown beneath the glittering lights, perfectly composed despite the empire she had helped destroy. Around her neck hung confidence like armor. Elena stepped forward through the crowd before fear could stop her. Adrian. Her voice cut sharply across the ballroom. Hundreds of faces turned instantly. Security moved toward her, but Elena lifted the gold lighter high into the air. Ask her about the Black Falcon Consortium. Silence crashed through the room. For the first time since Monaco, Celeste Laurent stopped smiling. The ballroom fell so silent that even the rain against the skyscraper windows seemed loud. Hundreds of powerful people turned toward Celeste Laurent at once, while camera flashes exploded across the room like lightning. For the first time since Elena had met her, Celeste looked genuinely unsettled. Adrian's eyes moved slowly from the gold lighter in Elena's hand to the woman standing beside him. What is she talking about? He asked quietly. Celeste recovered almost instantly, her expression softening with practiced disbelief. Adrian, this is insane. But Elena stepped closer before security could remove her. 5 years ago your name was Camille Verno, she said clearly. You infiltrated energy corporations across Europe using fabricated identities tied to the Black Falcon Consortium. Murmurs spread rapidly through the ballroom. Investors exchanged stunned looks. Reporters lifted phones immediately. Celeste laughed softly under her breath. She sounds desperate. Then explain the lighter, Elena answered. Adrian took the gold lighter slowly from Elena's hand. His jaw tightened the moment he noticed the Black Falcon engraving hidden beneath the metal. Elena continued carefully. The lighter contains an encrypted access chip linked to the server breach in Zurich. Celeste's calm expression cracked for the first time. Barely visible. But Adrian saw it too. Elena reached into her coat pocket and handed Adrian the final document she had uncovered hours earlier. A classified intelligence report connecting Black Falcon operatives to corporate infiltration schemes across multiple countries. At the bottom of the page sat a photograph of Camille Verno standing beside the same Russian consultant from Geneva, the same lighter visible in his hand. Adrian stared at the image without moving. Slowly, painfully, the truth settled across his face. Celeste, he said quietly, almost like he no longer recognized her. Tell me this is not real. For one suspended moment, the entire ballroom waited. Then Celeste exhaled softly and smiled again. But this time there was no warmth left inside it. You were never supposed to see that file, she admitted calmly. Gasps rippled across the room. Adrian looked physically struck by the confession. Elena watched the exact second his heart broke behind his eyes. Security teams moved quickly after that. Federal agents entered through the ballroom doors while executives shouted questions over each other. But Adrian barely seemed to hear any of it. He stood frozen beneath the crystal lights, staring at the woman he had trusted most, realizing she had built their entire relationship on manipulation and lies. Celeste glanced once more toward Elena before agents escorted her away. You were smarter than I expected, she said quietly. Elena said nothing. Some victories felt too painful to celebrate. 6 months later, Tuscany glowed gold beneath the late summer sun. The vineyards stretched endlessly across rolling hills while warm wind moved through the olive trees surrounding the restored countryside estate. Elena stood near the terrace railing watching the sunset melt across the horizon when footsteps approached behind her. She did not need to turn around and know it was Adrian. He stopped beside her quietly, no longer carrying the cold, untouchable energy that once filled every room around him. Coal energy had survived, but Adrian had changed completely after the scandal. He rebuilt the company smaller, cleaner, transparent. No more hidden alliances. No more illusions. I almost destroyed my life because I trusted the wrong person, he said softly. Elena finally looked at him. No, you almost destroyed yourself because you stopped trusting your instincts. Adrian smiled faintly. And you saved me anyway. The evening light caught his face as he reached slowly into his pocket. Elena's breath caught when she saw the small velvet box in his hand. The most dangerous secret was never the spy, Adrian whispered. It was how completely I fell in love with you before I realized it. Tears burned unexpectedly behind Elena's eyes as he opened the box beneath the golden Tuscan sky. And for the first time since Monaco, The future no longer felt dangerous at all.